Destiny was never meant to be a forever game. It wasn't structured to be an ongoing MMORPG receiving expansions and DLC every year for decades like World of Warcraft. Destiny 2 is almost 6 years old, and many players are starting to come around to the idea that a third installment might be required to fix a lot of problems within the game. Here are my top 5 reasons that Bungie should at least consider making Destiny 3. Number 1. Continual maintenance and downtime. Ever since Beyond Light in 2020, we've been constantly reminded by the developers and through weird quirks within the game that Destiny 2 is just becoming unwieldy. Bungie have commented there is so much happening within the game and so many systems connected to each other that developing new content or adjusting older content is just a mammoth task. This was when we saw the introduction of the Destiny Content Vault, the system in which Bungie would take away missions, locations and activities in order to refactor and restructure them, with the goal of one day reintroducing them into the game. The DCV was met with huge backlash, and we're still feeling tremors of this today, as I'll get to later with the new player experience. It turns out players don't want to lose big chunks of a live service game that they have paid for. More recently though, Bungie have announced that going forward there'll be no vaulting of yearly expansions in Destiny 2. Seasonal stories and content would still be removed, but this is a huge win for players who desperately want planets and mainline locations to stick around. So, have they managed to fix the underlying problems that made removing locations a necessity? It doesn't appear so. Since Lightfall's release in February 2023, and even in the months leading up to Lightfall, Destiny 2 has been plagued with bugs and glitches following every content and balance patch. It started with the removal of rare engrams in January, where it was reported that players were losing entire characters upon logging in after downloading the update, meaning Bungie had to roll back. Most recently, in their first mid-season balance patch since Lightfall, there were tens of bugs and glitches introduced. Along with these issues, the game was down for one of the longest periods in its history for emergency maintenance. There have been periods of unplanned downtime and emergency maintenance recently that have lasted significantly longer than Bungie had estimated, and these incidents are becoming all too frequent. Many players are beginning to question whether or not this instability is too much for a live service game, where things like beating a dungeon solo without dying are both a very difficult task and a time commitment, and nowadays a flip of the coin as to whether the servers are going to go bang before you finish. Number 2. Equipment is bloated. When the Destiny Content Vault came along with Beyond Light, so too did weapon sunsetting. This was supposed to be a measure to put in place to keep the sandbox fresh and to stop players from relying on guns from years in the past without needing to power creep new weapons, making them stronger and stronger. Weapon sunsetting is long gone, but the effects of it are still being felt. There are plenty of older weapons I'd love to have back in my arsenal, but can no longer equip. Even if I did get these weapons back, however, there has been such a shift in the 6 years that Destiny 2 has been out that things like how weapons are masterworked, which perks can roll on certain weapons, and which origin traits are available, that the sandbox has become a mess. Ironically, even with weapons sunsetting being introduced to stop power creep, Bungie has still managed to add so many traits and other small bonuses to new weapons that the power creep is probably worse than ever. That's not even to mention exotics. There are currently 85 exotic weapons in Destiny 2, and over 35 exotic armor pieces per class. I'm all for variety in builds, but there are at least 40 weapons and 15 armor pieces per class that could be removed from the game entirely and nobody would bat an eyelid. This many pieces of armor or weapons in the game not only inflates how big the game is and how much the server needs to keep track of, but it's also a balancing nightmare. Balancing items in any MMORPG is like whack-a-mole. Every time you take a swing at the best performing weapon in a game, the second best will come right up and take its place. This would no doubt happen even if Destiny 2 had 10 exotic weapons, but it would be much easier to make 10 weapons feel balanced, along with a feeling you could put one of those weapons comfortably at the centre of a build. Number 3. The game is too big. We've just talked about how there is too much equipment bloat. Let's talk more about what I referenced in the first reason, overall bloat. This can come in the form of quests, activities, vendors, locations, playlists, and more. If I were to focus on certain areas of the game, I'd say the first to get the sword has to be Gambit. It was a really cool idea, but the mode has just never found its feet. All we have now is a sigh and a shrug when we need to go and get a pinnacle, at least for most players, and when Bungie inevitably drop power levels, there is going to be even less of a reason to jump into this playlist. There hasn't been a new Gambit map in years, and the newest one we had is not even in rotation anymore. It's time to move on and stop tweaking this mode. Then, eventually when Destiny 3 does come along, I don't think a lot of players will miss it. Currencies and the economy of Destiny 2 is also a real pain point for a lot of players. There's a lot that could be done in Destiny 2, but as we saw recently, even with a concerted effort to remove some of the useless currencies, we still have 3 or 4 currencies for the Blind Well on the Dreaming City, Phantasmal Cores and other pseudo-weapon crafting currencies for the Nightmare Lectern on the Moon, and the dreaded Finest Matterweave and Rainmakers that players wish they could literally just burn. I don't know why some of these weren't just flat removed when the economy pass was done a few months back, but I do have to believe there is something not insignificant tying them into the game. Bungie have learned a lot in the past 6 years working on Destiny 2 in regard to what works and what doesn't. Locations, modes and currencies are just 3 examples of what can be cut in order to make Destiny 3 a more refined game. Number 4. New player experience. Let's be real, it's bloody hard to convince a friend to start playing Destiny right now. There's no real starting point in the game anymore. Nowhere that has a solid campaign as an introduction to the quote Destiny universe, and no, Surehand's New Light campaign does not count. I'd struggle to find any way to properly welcome a player into the world of Destiny and feel comfortable they can pick it up, learn it, and begin to master the game's systems one by one. The Red War campaign, in retrospect, really was a pretty solid foundation for new players. You may not look back to year 1 of Destiny 2 with rose-coloured glasses. There was plenty to not like about it. However, if you think back to the Red War in a vacuum, it did everything it needed to do to onboard new players and help them feel invested in the world. Firstly, your home is destroyed by the big bad. You see the Vanguard protecting civilians and fighting to hold ground. Then you make it onto the enemy ship, come face to face with the antagonist and lose. You're immediately connected, you know who the villain is, what is at stake, and who are the people you are fighting with who are helping you on your journey. The rest of the campaign then revolves around regrouping with the Vanguard before launching a full-scale assault on the enemy and succeeding. Everything is fed to you at the right pace, and you're given just the right amount of information without a lot of exposition dumping, something which Destiny 2 has actually become a lot worse at in recent years. The end of the Light and Darkness saga, culminating in what I have to assume is the defeat of the Witness, is the best time to reset, start a fresh story with a few new characters sprinkled in, with a new installment of Destiny. Number 5. World of Destiny. Consider this last reason a little bit of self-service. I often wish that Destiny was built a little bit more like an MMORPG. Destiny is a great live service first person shooter, but it doesn't have a lot of elements that I feel belong in a game that calls itself an MMORPG. Allow me to explain. MMOs feel a little bit like a second life. Yes, there are epic, world-threatening bosses and events, but there is also a not insignificant part of the game that can be just hanging up trophies in your player-owned house, fishing for rare fish that only spawn 1 in 100,000 casts, or crafting potions for your next adventure. These little connecting activities are what separate MMORPGs from online shared world games. Now, fishing in Destiny would be pretty ridiculous, as would a lot of the smaller activities from other MMORPGs. With that being said, I think there are things that could be done in your downtime to give the game a more immersive side. Not everything has to be kill this boss, then complete this strike. A good starting point for Destiny 3 here would be bigger patrol zones that feel more akin to an open world with things to find and collect. As there's a good chance we venture outside of the solar system after the final shape, it seems like a great time to plonk down a big colony ship on a new planet and set about conquering patrol zones. Moving between patrol zones in-game, rather than opening the director and selecting a new location on a different planet, would feel more like we're exploring the location. On top of this, I'd love to see more world bosses added to the game, and systems where you can summon other players to help defeat it via a radio broadcast or something similar. These were ideas that were pitched to us when Destiny was first revealed over a decade ago, and the way it was implemented back then, and even through to this day, is such a letdown compared to where my teenage mind was allowed to wander. Through the years that I've played Destiny, I've also played The Elder Scrolls Online on and off too. One of the biggest things that I craved was that unbelievable rare drop while killing mobs as I make my way from one location to another in a big open world. This is where Destiny could really innovate on where it is currently, and personally this is the single biggest reason I'd love to see a Destiny 3. So in summary, there are plenty of valid reasons why Bungie should be strongly considering making Destiny 3. I will say, however, there are a number of reasons why Destiny 3 would do more harm than good to the franchise. It would certainly be a pivotal moment for the series, and you'd have to imagine that any brand new installment of Destiny would have to be carefully considered and planned out, as it would most certainly be the last installment, at least in a good while. Destiny 3 or no? If you had your way, which way would you go? Leave me your thoughts in the comments below the like button. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.